The Devil All the Time is a new movie on Netflix that stars Robert Pattinson, Tom Holland, and a fuck ton of other people. I'm not even going to go into that. It was directed by Antonio Campos, and in this movie, it's honestly about just a bunch of fucked up people that do fucked up things. And I don't want to go into the plot too much because I really didn't know what it was about, and it's kind of hard to explain without spoiling anything. But just know it's about a bunch of fucked up people that do fucked up things in small little towns in Ohio and West Virginia. I was somewhat excited about this movie just because of the cast. It's an original movie on Netflix, so I was excited about this movie. But this movie is okay. I think it's just fine. I think what really drives this movie is the performances. This movie has a star-studded cast, and the performances carry this movie. I think Tom Holland and Robert Pattinson do a great job, even though they're not in the movie too much. Well, besides Tom Holland. Tom Holland's in the movie a lot. Robert Pattinson's not in the movie that much. But they have a scene together that is fucking fantastic. It's hands down the best part of the movie. And I won't spoil anything, but it was fucking great. I thought it was directed well, written well, and acted flawlessly. It was a great scene. And all the other supporting cast members do a great job too. I also think this movie has clear motivations for its characters. I think they develop it pretty well. They clearly show why characters act a certain way or why they do certain things. And sometimes movies have trouble doing that. I think this movie pulled off clearly showing characters' motivations. This movie is about religion, very much so. Not what religion is or anything like that. It's more of like what your beliefs can drive you to do. Things you might never want to do, or just crazy ass shit. And I'm not saying you specifically if you're a super religious person. I'm just saying these characters in the movie. It shows that sometimes religion can just drive someone insane or drive them to do things they thought they couldn't do or things they didn't want to do. And it's an interesting theme. And it's very well developed throughout this movie. I also think the directing in this movie is fine too. I think Antonio Campos captures the dread of this movie very well. It's shot very well, but he really captures the tone of just dread because this movie is really depressing. There's a lot of fucked up shit that happens in this movie, and honestly, there's not one happy moment in this movie. I think there really isn't. There's not one happy moment in this movie. This movie is extremely depressing. This movie is just so dreadful that it's sometimes hard to even enjoy this movie. There is so much fucked up shit that happens that it's hard to really root for anyone. I think the only characters in this movie I can root for is Tom Holland and his family, but the rest of the characters are just such dreadful people. And I will also say, I know I said they do a good job of setting motivations for the characters, why characters act a certain way. But man, this movie drags. The first act of this movie and the second act really drag. You really have no idea where they're going with this movie. I'm not saying they could really shave much of this movie off. I mean, it's pretty long. It's like 2 hours and 20 minutes. But I just don't know what they would take out. Maybe the story itself just isn't that interesting. And I think that's the main problem with this movie. The story has some cool themes and interesting themes. But overall, it's just not that interesting. Until the final act. I'll say the final act, when things start coming together, it does become pretty interesting. But the first 2/3, you're like, where the fuck is this going? And it will really turn some people off. I guarantee it. Also, there's a narrator in this movie that I feel like really didn't do much for this movie. It's like they thought the audience wouldn't understand things, how characters felt in a scene, and the narrator has to tell you how they feel, and they repeat it a bunch of times. They repeat the same line sometimes. And I was like, we don't need this fucking narrator. I know this movie's based off a novel, so maybe they didn't understand how to write this movie without having some sort of narrator telling you what's going on in a scene. But there were so many times I'm like, I understand why this character's acting this way or why he's sad. I get it. You don't have to tell me why. It was honestly distracting, and I found it very annoying. In the end, though, I found The Devil All the Time disappointing. Considering that it has a star-studded cast and it sounded like a pretty interesting plot, I feel like it fell flat. The directing's fine, there's some cool ideas in the movie, and there's some great performances in this movie, and a really, really great scene between Tom Holland and Robert Pattinson. But that doesn't save the movie from being pretty much too dreadful, too depressing, and like I said, drags a lot, especially in the first and second act. But the third act is still pretty interesting, but overall it doesn't save the movie. I'm going to give The Devil All the Time 6.5 Davy Daves. Yeah, this movie was really fucking depressing. I really think there was not 1 ounce of happiness in this movie. But that's probably what they're going for. But overall, it made the movie drag. At least I didn't pay for it. I mean, I pay for Netflix, but at least I didn't pay for the movie like I did for Mulan or Scoob. So, The Devil All the Time. If you've seen it, let me know what you guys thought of it. Thank you so much for watching. Click here to see more of Davey Dave's Takes.